The moment you're about to hear will shock even the most seasoned royal watchers. Imagine a glittering ballroom, golden chandeliers casting soft light over the regal crowd. Laughter and polite clinking of champagne glasses fill the air. And then, in a single, brutal instant, the atmosphere shifts. Whispers ripple through the room, eyes dart nervously, and a sense of disbelief hangs heavy over the crowd. Prince Harry. Yes, the very same Harry who once seemed inseparable from his brother, is being ushered out. Not politely, not with dignity, but thrown out, publicly, by none other than Prince William himself. The whispers are already turning into murmurs. Did he really just do that? In front of everyone. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. And it wasn't just any gathering. This was a high-profile royal event, one that drew dignitaries, celebrities, and members of the public with cameras poised to capture every expression. To witness a prince, an uninvited prince, being removed from his own family's events is unprecedented. But what's even more shocking is who finally voiced the words everyone had been silently thinking. Anne, Princess Anne. She looked at William, and with a rare firmness that has rarely been seen in public, she said, "Enough." Can you imagine the tension in that room? A tense, electric moment where centuries of royal decorum clashed with raw family conflict. You could almost hear the collective gasp of the royal observers and insiders alike. But what exactly led to this moment? How did relationships that once seemed unbreakable devolve into this open, high-stakes drama? And more importantly, what does this mean for the future of the royal family? To understand why William's action was so devastating, we need to rewind a bit. For decades, the royal family has prided itself on a certain image, united, composed, a symbol of stability for the nation. Prince Harry, however, has always had a complicated relationship with this image. Born into immense privilege, yet constantly living under the shadow of public expectation, Harry grew up trying to carve his own path. And while his mischievous, rebellious streak was often seen as charming during his early years, it became a source of tension as the years went on. We've all heard the stories, the infamous controversies, the private disputes that somehow found their way into tabloids, and the escalating media frenzy that has followed Harry wherever he went. But there's a lesser-known side to this drama, a side that reveals just how strained the bonds between the brothers really are. William, the heir apparent, has long carried the weight of the crown and the responsibility to uphold royal protocol. And when Harry's actions began to clash not just with tradition, but with public expectations and the image William is tasked to protect, friction was inevitable. This was not a sudden explosion. It was the result of years of subtle tensions, quiet resentments, and moments of private conflict that slowly built into public spectacle. And it all came to a head at a series of events that most people wouldn't even imagine as battlegrounds for sibling rivalry. State dinners, charity galas, and royal commemorations, places meant to showcase unity and elegance, became stages for subtle jabs, glaring tensions, and whispered confrontations. Take, for instance, the night of the annual Royal Charity Gala. It was a night when the royal family was expected to be a picture of unity, raising millions for worthy causes while the public and press looked on in admiration. But behind the scenes, the atmosphere was tense. Staff noticed Harry's unusual behavior, arriving late, avoiding eye contact with key members, and engaging in hushed, intense conversations away from the cameras. William, watching from across the room, clenched his jaw. Something had to give. The breaking point, insiders say, came when Harry openly ignored seating arrangements and protocol that were carefully planned down to the last detail. Guests were reportedly shocked as he made a pointed comment about family obligations and who truly matters in this house. For those not in the inner circle, it might have seemed like harmless chatter, but to William and other senior royals, it was the last straw. A blatant challenge to the hierarchy and to the very rules that have defined the monarchy for centuries. And then came Princess Anne's intervention. Known for her no-nonsense demeanor and often described as the queen of work due to her relentless focus and discipline, and rarely involves herself in family drama publicly. Yet, on this occasion, her patience had run out. She quietly approached William, nodded subtly, and uttered the words that would forever change the narrative. Enough. It was a moment heavy with authority and inevitability. She wasn't just speaking to William. She was speaking to the entire family, the staff, the guests, and even the watching world. What happened next was unprecedented. William, often seen as calm and composed, suddenly shifted from silent observation to decisive action. Harry, stunned and visibly unsettled, found himself being escorted away from the event, not angrily, not vindicatively, but with a clear, unmistakable message. Boundaries had been crossed, and there would be consequences. Cameras flashed. The murmurs grew louder. And yet, no official statement was made. The family retreated behind closed doors, leaving the public with speculation, rumors, and a media storm that was already beginning to brew. Now, think about the implications of this. This wasn't just a personal spat between brothers. This was a message to the entire world that the royal family is willing to take drastic action to maintain order and protect its image. For Harry, it was a public humiliation. For William, it was a calculated assertion of authority. And for the monarchy, it was a signal that the old rules still apply, but the enforcement of those rules has become increasingly personal, increasingly visible, and increasingly dramatic. But this story goes deeper than just one dramatic evening. Sources reveal that the tensions have been escalating behind the scenes for years. From disputes over royal duties and financial arrangements to disagreements over public appearances and media narratives, the cracks in the once impenetrable facade have widened considerably. Friends of the family report private meetings where arguments erupted, voices were raised, and ultimatums were given. And while much of this was contained behind palace walls, the leaks and whispers inevitably reached the press, fueling a cycle of speculation, judgment, and public fascination. Now, let's talk about the media frenzy that this incident has ignited. Within minutes of Harry being removed, headlines were already circulating. Royal rift escalates. William's bold move against brother, and finally draws the line. Social media exploded with commentary, memes, and heated debates. People were taking sides, speculating on motivations, and questioning loyalties. And in true royal fashion, every action, glance, and statement, or lack thereof, was scrutinized to the last detail. But beyond the gossip and speculation lies a profound question. What does this mean for the future of the monarchy? The world is watching. Allies and adversaries alike are analyzing every move, wondering whether this is a temporary conflict or the beginning of a long-term division within one of the most iconic families in history. And amidst all this, the stakes could not be higher. Reputation, influence, public trust, and family legacy all hang in the balance. So what really happened that night? What drove William to take such decisive action? And how will Harry respond to this public rebuke? Will the intervention buy and finally restore order, or has a new chapter of conflict just begun? These questions are not just idle speculation. They are the very pulse of a story that continues to unfold with every passing hour. And here's the twist you didn't see coming. Insiders hint that this event is just the tip of the iceberg. Behind closed doors, there are discussions, strategies, and even leaked communications that could reshape how we understand the dynamics of this royal family. Relationships are being recalibrated. Loyalties are being tested. And the next move could redefine the line between public duty and private conflict in ways we've never witnessed before. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be completely blindsided by someone you thought you could trust? That night, as the velvet curtains closed on the gala, Prince Harry experienced that shock in its most personal, most public form. Imagine being surrounded by opulence, cameras flashing, dignitaries whispering, and suddenly realizing that your own brother, not just any brother, but the one you grew up with, has just drawn a line in the sand. And not just any line, but a boundary you can't cross without facing consequences. The moment Harry was escorted out, the murmurs around the room turned into a low roar of disbelief. Guests who had spent the evening marveling at royal tradition now found themselves witnessing a spectacle more dramatic than any scripted event. And make no mistake, this wasn't just a fleeting embarrassment. This was a calculated statement, a move that would reverberate across the family, the palace, and the world. But why? What had pushed William, known for his composed and measured demeanor, to act so decisively? To understand, we need to dive into the layers of tension that have been building for years. It all starts with responsibility. William has always been acutely aware of the weight of the crown he is destined to inherit. Every action, every public appearance, every decision, even the smallest gestures, carries symbolism, expectation, and scrutiny. Harry, on the other hand, has often resisted this suffocating structure. He has sought independence, pursued personal projects, and openly challenged traditional norms in ways that made William uneasy. Some say it began subtly, almost imperceptibly, in their teenage years. While William focused on studies, protocols, and preparation for a life of duty, Harry gravitated toward spontaneity and risk. The playful antics that were charming in childhood grew into decisions that increasingly drew media attention that was not always flattering. Paparazzi snapshots, tabloid narratives, and leaked stories became a daily barrage. And though the brothers shared moments of genuine camaraderie, the pressure of public expectation began to magnify their differences. By the time Harry married and started his own family, the rift had widened. William, carrying the invisible but heavy mantle of heir, began to perceive Harry's choices not as harmless rebellion, but as threats to the family's image. He saw interviews, public statements, and media tours that seemed to prioritize personal narrative over family unity. And it wasn't just about appearances. It was about control, legacy, and the chain of succession that has governed the monarchy for centuries. Meanwhile, Harry was living a parallel narrative, a story of independence, self-definition, and sometimes defiance. His choices, often framed as courageous by supporters, were seen by insiders as reckless provocations. The tension escalated quietly, in closed-door meetings and family gatherings that should have been ordinary. Staffers recall whispers in corridors, hushed arguments behind closed doors, and nights when the brothers avoided eye contact at events. These moments were invisible to the public, yet they simmered, slowly forming the undercurrent that led to the explosive scene at the gala. The night in question, sources reveal, was not a spontaneous eruption. There were warnings. Discussions had been held, agreements attempted, and boundaries carefully communicated. Harry, however, had crossed them in ways that William could no longer ignore. And when and added her voice, her firm, undeniable enough, the silent threshold had been breached. Let's pause and consider, and for a moment. Often described as the most disciplined of the royal siblings, she is a figure whose authority is rarely questioned. She doesn't participate in theatrics. She doesn't linger in gossip. She acts with precision, and her word carries weight. By intervening, she essentially sanctioned William's decision, giving him the confidence and moral authority to remove Harry. It was a rare alliance of conviction between siblings, a united front in the most dramatic of circumstances. But the consequences of that moment extend far beyond one night. Public perception shifted almost instantly. Royal commentators speculated on motives, body language experts analyzed every movement, and social media became a frenzy of opinions, memes, and debates. Some defended William's right to enforce boundaries. Others criticized the apparent ruthlessness of removing a family member in public. And in the midst of all this, Harry's silence, whether strategic or stunned, added layers of intrigue and suspicion. There's another layer to consider, the psychological impact on Harry. Being publicly removed by his brother is not simply a moment of embarrassment. It is a profound emotional shock. He is a man who has always valued loyalty, camaraderie, and familial bonds. And in that moment, those bonds were visibly, unmistakably strained. Insiders hint that Harry spent the following days in private reflection, wrestling with feelings of rejection, frustration, and confusion. He questioned his choices, his relationships, and perhaps even his future within the royal fold. Meanwhile, William had to navigate the delicate aftermath of his decision. It's one thing to remove a brother in private. It's quite another to do so in front of the entire royal family, media, and public. He had to maintain composure, project authority, and prepare for the inevitable scrutiny that would follow. Sources say he consulted with senior advisors, including palace aides and close confidants, to ensure that every subsequent move, statements, appearances, and protocols was meticulously managed. And then there's the ripple effect on other family members. Kate, often described as a stabilizing force, reportedly worked tirelessly behind the scenes to soothe tensions, mediate conversations, and manage public perception. Other siblings, cousins, and extended family members found themselves caught between loyalty to William, empathy for Harry, and the instinct to protect the family's reputation. But perhaps the most fascinating element is how this event has reshaped alliances within the royal household. Individuals who had previously maintained neutral stances began aligning with either William or Harry, creating subtle divisions that extend into the highest levels of royal operations. Staffers report whispered conversations in corridors, tension during formal dinners, and a palpable sense of anticipation at upcoming events. Everyone is watching, wondering who will move next, and what the consequences will be. And yet, the public is still left with more questions than answers. Why did Harry allow the situation to escalate to this point? Why did William feel the need to act so publicly? And how will Anne's intervention influence the trajectory of this family drama moving forward? The answers, insiders hint, are far more complicated than a simple sibling disagreement. They involve years of negotiation, moments of perceived betrayal, and decisions that balance personal relationships with institutional responsibility. There's also a financial and strategic angle to consider. Royal events are not just ceremonial. They are platforms for influence, diplomacy, and legacy building. By removing Harry, William is sending a clear signal about who is trusted, who is accountable, and who aligns with the vision of the monarchy's future. Every guest, every media outlet, and every observer interprets this as more than a personal quarrel. It is a statement of power, authority, and long-term planning. And let's not forget the media firestorm that followed. Within hours, headlines exploded around the world. Prince Harry ousted by brother. Royal rift reaches new heights and draws the line, finally. Social media analysts noted record engagement rates, with public debate reaching new levels of intensity. Memes circulated, pundits speculated, and the story dominated global news cycles. Every detail of that night, from body language to timing to whispered conversations, was dissected, shared, and debated endlessly. But the true story, the one hidden behind the flashing cameras and headlines, is even more intricate. Sources hint at confidential meetings, strategic communications, and private exchanges that could reshape the monarchy's internal dynamics for years. Decisions were made, not in the spotlight, but in hushed corridors, drawing on decades of experience, tradition, and political calculation. So what happens next? Will Harry retreat further, redefine his role, or fight back against the public rebuke? Will William's decisive move strengthen his position, or spark further conflict within the family? And what role will Anne continue to play as the voice of authority, the arbiter of boundaries, and the silent force behind this unfolding drama? As the palace recalibrates, one thing is clear. The events of that night were not merely symbolic. They were a declaration, a reshaping of relationships, a statement about power, loyalty, and the lengths the royal family will go to protect its legacy. And yet, even as the dust settles, a shadow of uncertainty looms. Because behind every closed door, every hushed conversation, and every strategic decision, there are truths yet to be revealed, and consequences yet to be felt. But what came next would shock the world even further and redefine the line between personal betrayal and public spectacle. Have you ever wondered what really happens behind palace doors when the cameras are off, the glittering gowns are put away, and the world isn't watching? That's where the real drama begins. Because while the public saw a royal brother being escorted out of a gala, what they didn't see were the communications, the strategy sessions, and the whispered negotiations that unfolded in the quietest corners of Buckingham Palace in Kensington. Immediately after the gala, the palace staff went into overdrive. Not to clean, not to prepare for the next event, but to manage the fallout of a situation that could spiral at any second. Confidential reports suggest that senior aides convened an emergency meeting in a discreet wing of the palace, where whispers bounced off ornate walls and tension hung as thick as the chandeliers. This wasn't a casual discussion. It was a strategic session on crisis management at the highest level. William, now acutely aware that the public's gaze had intensified, reviewed every detail of Harry's behavior that night. Every word, every gesture, every slight deviation from protocol was dissected. Advisors produced timelines, photographs, and even transcripts from private conversations that had leaked in previous weeks. Every piece of information served one purpose: to understand what had caused the escalation and how to control the narrative before it escalated further. Meanwhile, Harry was not idle. Reports indicate that he retreated to Frogmore Cottage, his private residence, seeking both counsel and reassurance. His inner circle, longtime friends, trusted aides, and legal advisors were immediately consulted. Plans were discussed, potential public statements drafted, and media strategies debated. Harry's objective? To respond without appearing weak, to protect his reputation, and to regain a sense of agency in a situation. Insiders reveal that the next steps were meticulously planned. William, with Anne's endorsement, set up a series of private meetings with advisors to outline possible scenarios. What if Harry refused to comply with new boundaries? What if the public sided with him? How could the palace maintain authority while avoiding a complete family implosion? Every detail was considered. Logistics, messaging, optics, and even psychological tactics designed to influence Harry's choices without direct confrontation. At the same time, Harry wasn't waiting. Private consultations with media strategists, public relations experts, and even psychological advisors were arranged. Harry's team evaluated potential responses, drafted conditional statements, and considered options ranging from full public engagement to strategic silence. Each option carried risks. Too aggressive, and he would appear confrontational; too passive, and he would seem weak. The balancing act was delicate, precarious, and emotionally exhausting. And there's a human element that the public rarely sees: fear. Not fear of the press or fear of protocol, but fear of losing family. Harry reportedly spent hours reflecting on the relationship with William, questioning past decisions, and wondering if reconciliation was even possible. Privately, aides observed his mood shift, moments of frustration giving way to melancholy, and bursts of strategic energy. The emotional roller coaster was relentless, amplified by isolation and the constant media glare. Meanwhile, palace staff reported an unusual level of tension among advisors. Whispers in corridors suggested disagreements over strategy, concerns about potential leaks, and debates over how much transparency was appropriate. The atmosphere resembled a high-stakes negotiation more than a traditional royal household, and every move carried weight. Every comment could be misinterpreted. Every glance could signal allegiance or betrayal. And yet, amidst all this complexity, one truth remained: history was watching. Every decision, every exchange, every leak and counter-leak would be scrutinized not just in the present, but in the annals of royal history. Biographers, journalists, and historians would later dissect these events as pivotal moments, times when family dynamics, personal ambition, and institutional responsibility collided in dramatic fashion. But here's the twist that most people don't realize: this was only the beginning. Behind the scenes, there were reports of secret communications between senior royal advisors and external contacts, diplomats, media consultants, and even legal experts. Plans were discussed to shape public narratives, manage potential scandals, and even influence political perception. The private universe surrounding the royal family was vast, meticulously managed, and fiercely guarded. Even more astonishing, sources suggest that there were contingency plans for every possible outcome. If Harry attempted to bypass official channels, measures were ready to counteract him. If media leaks threatened to spiral, controlled narratives were prepared. Every eventuality was considered, rehearsed, and strategically positioned. It was crisis management at its most sophisticated and most emotionally charged. And through it all, the public remained largely in the dark. Headlines hinted at tension, tabloids speculated, but few understood the intricate web of communications, negotiations, and emotional stakes at play. For William and Anne, this was about maintaining order, authority, and legacy. For Harry, it was about self-preservation, personal dignity, and reclaiming agency in a situation that had escalated beyond his control. As the days following the gala unfolded, insiders noticed subtle shifts in behavior. Meetings were rescheduled, staff members whispered in corridors, and protocols were adjusted to accommodate both authority and optics. Harry was reportedly isolating himself strategically, consulting his team in private, while William solidified his position with allies and key advisors, and remained the calm, guiding presence, her voice shaping decisions from behind the scenes, her influence undeniable. And yet, even with all the planning, all the strategy, and all the calculated moves, no one could predict the next explosive twist. Because in a family where emotions run deep, where history looms large, and where public scrutiny never sleeps, even the most carefully orchestrated plans can be upended by a single conversation, a misunderstood gesture, or an unexpected leak. But what came next would not just shock the royal household. It would shock the world, forcing everyone to question everything they thought they knew about loyalty, power, and the bonds of family. Have you ever witnessed a storm before it hits? The tension's so thick you can almost touch it, yet the first raindrops haven't even fallen? That's exactly how the world experienced the aftermath of Prince William's unprecedented move. Harry's public removal was no longer confined to the walls of Buckingham Palace or the corridors of Kensington. It had become a global spectacle. Every news outlet, social media platform, and tabloid had their eyes on the unfolding drama, dissecting every gesture, every word, every silence. Almost immediately, the public reaction was intense, unpredictable, and deeply polarized. Social media erupted, hashtags trending within minutes. Hashtag Royal Rift, hashtag William versus Harry, hashtag and says enough. Every photo from the gala, every whispered comment, and every body language cue was scrutinized, analyzed, and debated. Analysts dissected facial expressions. Was Harry angry, ashamed, or confused? Was William stern, resolute, or remorseful? The world became a magnifying glass for family tension, and every citizen had an opinion. But the public reaction was only the surface. Beneath it lay a carefully orchestrated flurry of strategy and counter-strategy. William and their closest advisors worked tirelessly to manage both optics and narrative. Messages were drafted, communications lines secured, and contingencies prepared. They knew that the world was watching, and that every misstep could escalate the situation beyond control. Yet Harry wasn't idle. Sources close to him reported long nights of private reflection, calls with trusted confidants, and hours of strategizing. He understood that this wasn't just about being escorted out of a gala. It was a declaration of power, a public humiliation designed to set boundaries, and a challenge to his autonomy. His next move had to be precise, measured, and impactful. Any public reaction would be dissected, any silence interpreted. The media, sensing blood in the water, didn't wait. Within hours, journalists had contacted unnamed palace insiders, lawyers, and former staff, all hoping to extract details that would feed the global appetite for royal drama. Pundits speculated. Had this been brewing for years? Were William and Harry's differences irreparable? What role had Anne truly played? And why had she intervened now? Every outlet was scrambling for the story behind the story, and for the exclusive angle that would captivate millions. Meanwhile, private communications within the palace became even more critical. William, in consultation with senior advisors, outlined a precise strategy to protect the royal family's image while asserting his authority. He reviewed every possible scenario, Harry issuing a public statement, sympathetic leaks to the press, even coordinated responses from other family members. Each contingency was meticulously planned, rehearsed, and prepared. Anne's role remained pivotal. Sources reveal she convened multiple private meetings, advising William on the timing, tone, and method of communications. Her influence was subtle but unmistakable. She was the anchor that kept the palace from overreacting, the voice of reason that balanced emotion with strategy. Her simple but firm enough had sparked the entire chain of events, and now she was steering the aftermath with precision. The tension didn't stay confined to private meetings. It spilled into every public appearance. Observers noted Harry's deliberate positioning at subsequent events, avoiding direct contact with William, maintaining strategic distances, and carefully managing interactions with staff and the public. Every smile, every nod, every glance was a message. a silent communication to both family and world. William, on the other hand, maintained his composure in public, projecting calm authority while subtly reinforcing boundaries. Advisors monitored everything: body language experts, communication specialists, and even psychological analysts were employed to anticipate Harry's reactions and guide William's responses. The palace had become a chessboard, and every move was deliberate, every countermove anticipated. But here's where the intrigue deepened. Sources indicate that Harry had begun reaching out to allies outside the immediate royal circle. Trusted friends, legal advisors, and media strategists were consulted to craft a response that would preserve dignity while subtly challenging the public narrative. He understood the stakes. Any misstep could deepen the rift, further damage his reputation, and destabilize relationships he had spent years trying to maintain. Public reactions varied wildly. Some hailed William's decisive action as a necessary step to maintain order and discipline within the royal family. They argued that boundaries had been crossed and that leadership required courage and clarity. Others sympathized with Harry, framing him as a victim of public humiliation, an independent spirit being forced into compliance with outdated traditions. Online forums became battlefields of opinion, with loyalists and critics trading barbed commentary, memes, and analysis. The palace, recognizing the intensity of global attention, moved quickly to shape the narrative. Carefully worded statements were issued, emphasizing family unity, respect for protocol, and the importance of maintaining tradition. But even these statements were dissected for nuance. Was there a hint of rebuke? A subtle endorsement? A coded message for Harry? Every word mattered, every phrase was analyzed, and every silence spoke volumes. Behind the scenes, meetings grew increasingly tense. Advisors debated the limits of privacy versus the necessity of transparency. Some argued for public engagement to quell speculation. Others insisted on controlled silence, arguing that any statement could exacerbate tensions. William and senior staff weighed these options carefully, balancing family dynamics with public expectation. Meanwhile, Harry's inner circle wasn't idle either. Strategic discussions revolved around media management, potential leaks, and reputation recovery. Every scenario was considered: an op-ed, a measured interview, or a private communication to key stakeholders. Psychological implications were also factored in: the impact on Harry's children, his public image, and his future relationship with William. And then came the tipping point. Reports surfaced that confidential letters, previously unseen, were circulating among select media outlets. These letters allegedly contained private reflections, subtle critiques, and hints of past grievances. The palace immediately initiated damage control. William and convened emergency meetings, evaluating the potential fallout and preparing counter-strategies. The letters, while carefully worded, had the power to reshape public perception and potentially intensify the rift between the brothers. The world watched, fascinated. Commentators speculated endlessly. Would Harry respond publicly? Would William issue a statement to reinforce his authority? How far would go to maintain order and uphold family integrity? Every headline was a new twist, every leak a potential game-changer. But amid the spectacle, the human element remained starkly visible. Harry, once the carefree, mischievous prince, now appeared contemplative, burdened, and strategic. William, often seen as composed and methodical, revealed subtle flashes of frustration and concern. And, calm yet firm, remained the linchpin, guiding the family through a storm that was as emotional as it was public. Insiders suggest that the next moves would define not just personal relationships, but the public perception of the monarchy itself. Any miscalculation could fracture alliances, inflame media narratives, and trigger long-term repercussions. The delicate balance between private loyalty and public duty had never been more fragile. And yet, the most dramatic moment was still to come. Because as meticulously as the palace strategists had planned, as carefully as Harry had considered his options, the inevitable confrontation loomed. A meeting that would pit brother against brother, loyalty against independence, authority against rebellion. A meeting that could either bridge the divide or widen it irreparably. But what happened in that room, behind closed doors, would shock everyone. even those who thought they understood the dynamics of this royal family, and set the stage for a conflict that no one could have anticipated. Have you ever wondered what it's like to sit across from someone you love, someone you trust, and realize that every word they say could change your life forever? That's exactly what happened in the secret, heavily secured room deep inside Kensington Palace. William and Harry faced each other, not as brothers sharing childhood memories, but as adversaries in a battle that had been simmering for years, now exploding in real time. The meeting had been requested under the guise of family reconciliation, but insiders say it quickly morphed into a high-stakes confrontation. The room was quiet, save for the occasional creak of polished floorboards and the subtle hum of palace security in the background. There was no audience, no public gaze. Yet the weight of centuries of royal tradition hung over them like a storm cloud. William spoke first, calm, measured, yet with an unmistakable edge. His words were deliberate, each one chosen to convey authority while testing Harry's reactions. "Harry," he began, "we can't continue like this. The boundaries have been crossed one too many times. The public scrutiny is immense, and we cannot allow personal disagreements to undermine the family." Harry listened, his expression unreadable, though those who know him could see the tension in his jaw and the flicker of defiance in his eyes. He responded cautiously, aware that any misstep could escalate the situation further. "I've always tried to do what's right for our family," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "But it feels like the rules keep changing, depending on who's enforcing them." It was at that moment that the room grew even tenser. William leaned forward slightly, his piercing gaze locked onto his brother. "This isn't about changing rules, Harry. This is about respect, about responsibility. You've had opportunities to act within the framework of the family, and yet you continue to act outside it." Harry's response was sharper than anyone anticipated. "And you think I haven't been trying? I've been trying to find my place, to do right by the family, while also trying to live my own life. I'm not just a reflection of protocol. I'm a person too." For a moment, silence fell. It wasn't the silence of calm reflection. It was the silence of tension, of a storm waiting to break. Both brothers understood the stakes. This wasn't just a quarrel. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the future of their relationship and, by extension, the monarchy itself. Insiders reveal that Anne, though not physically present, had a silent influence on the conversation. Messages and advice had been conveyed through intermediaries, emphasizing the importance of maintaining dignity, balancing emotion with authority, and steering the conversation toward resolution, or at least containment. Her shadow loomed over the room, a subtle reminder that the family's integrity was on the line. As the discussion continued, it became clear that neither side was willing to yield completely. William emphasized the need for accountability, for understanding the consequences of public actions. Harry countered with personal grievances, highlighting moments where he felt misunderstood, constrained, or unfairly judged. The conversation oscillated between calm reasoning and heated emotion, a dance of words that could tip in any direction at one point. The tension escalated further. William's tone sharpened. "Harry, you have to understand, this isn't just about you. It's about the family, the institution, and the responsibilities we all carry. You can't ignore that." Harry, feeling cornered yet defiant, responded with a pointed challenge. "And you think I don't understand responsibility? I've faced it in ways you can't even imagine. But I also have to live my life on my terms, not just as a pawn in the palace hierarchy." The clash of perspectives wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. William represented tradition, duty, and the monarchy's continuity. Harry embodied independence, personal agency, and the desire to define his own narrative. The tension between these forces had been simmering for years, and now it erupted in a way that left both parties emotionally raw and strategically vulnerable. Sources indicate that as the conversation progressed, advisors monitoring from nearby rooms were on edge. Every tone, every inflection, every pause was analyzed for signs of escalation or de-escalation. Contingency plans were ready in case the confrontation turned physical, verbal, or resulted in an immediate public leak. Every advisor knew that the outcome of this single meeting could redefine the narrative of the entire royal family. Harry, realizing that words alone would not bridge the divide, attempted a conciliatory approach. He spoke of shared memories, childhood experiences, and moments of unity, trying to find common ground. Yet William remained firm, emphasizing the need for accountability and adherence to protocol. It was a delicate balance, emotion and reason colliding, brotherhood and duty intertwining. Then came the moment that changed everything. According to insiders, Harry reached for a document, a set of notes, perhaps a private letter, or a strategic outline of grievances and proposals for compromise. The document, whether intended as a peace offering or a subtle assertion, became the focal point of the confrontation. William's reaction was immediate and intense. He saw not just words on paper, but a potential threat to authority, a test of boundaries, and a challenge to the family's control of the narrative. Voices rose, emotions spilled, and the carefully maintained composure that had defined both princes during the gala began to crack. For the first time, both men were visibly rattled. Words were sharp, accusations subtle but pointed, and the room crackled with tension. Every observer, even behind closed doors, could sense that this meeting was no longer about reconciliation. It was about defining power, control, and the rules of engagement within the family. And then, just as it seemed the confrontation might reach a breaking point, a silent signal came from the aides nearby, the need for de-escalation. William, taking a deep breath, attempted to regain control. He leaned back, allowed the tension to ease slightly, and framed a final challenge. We need to agree on boundaries. We need to protect the family, the institution, and ourselves. Otherwise, this doesn't end tonight. It continues, publicly, privately, and everywhere in between. Harry, exhausted yet resolute, nodded slowly. I understand, he said. But understand this. I'm not going anywhere, and I won't be silenced. As both men left the room, advisors and staffers were left to process the outcome. Some saw a glimmer of reconciliation. Others recognized the cracks that had deepened. And outside the palace walls, the world was unaware of the details, but would soon feel their effects in headlines, leaks, and the ever-intensifying media storm. The most shocking revelation, however, was yet to come. Insiders hinted that what had been discussed in that private room was just the surface. There were additional documents, unspoken agreements, and potential leaks that could redefine the rift entirely. And one of those leaks, experts say, would soon hit the public with a force that no one, not even the palace, was fully prepared for. Because when family, duty, and public expectation collide, the consequences aren't just personal, they're global. But what came next would escalate the feud beyond anyone's expectations and threaten to shake the monarchy itself. Have you ever watched a single moment explode into a worldwide spectacle? That's exactly what happened the morning after William and Harry's private confrontation. The palace, which had carefully managed its image for centuries, suddenly found itself in the eye of a storm that no public statement or prepared press release could contain. By dawn, every major news outlet had picked up on the gala incident. Headlines screamed across websites and social feeds. Prince Harry ousted by William. Royal rift deepens and draws the line. Royal authority asserted. Brothers at war. Family feud exposed. Even those who had been casual followers of royal affairs were now glued to their screens, hungry for every detail. Social media amplified the chaos. On platforms like Twitter and Instagram, hashtags like #RoyalDrama, #William vs. Harry, and #andsaysenough trended globally. Fans and critics alike dissected the story with relentless energy. Supporters of Harry framed him as a misunderstood, independent-minded royal being bullied by a rigid system. William loyalists emphasized his need to enforce boundaries, maintain protocol, and protect the monarchy. And somewhere in the middle, observers tried to make sense of the emotional, political, and historical implications of the feud. But while the public spectacle dominated the headlines, the palace scrambled behind the scenes to manage the fallout. William convened another series of high-level meetings with senior advisors, communication specialists, and legal experts. Every press report, every social media post, and every leaked photograph was analyzed to determine whether it could be leveraged or required damage control. The goal was simple: contain the narrative, maintain authority, and prevent the feud from spiraling into a full-blown crisis that could compromise the monarchy's reputation. At the same time, Harry's team went into overdrive. Private communications, interviews, and strategic leaks were being coordinated to present his side of the story without overtly antagonizing his brother. Every statement was carefully crafted to project strength, dignity, and personal agency while subtly challenging the perception that he had been publicly humiliated. The media frenzy quickly escalated. Analysts noticed patterns in coverage that suggested a coordinated narrative war. Some outlets highlighted William's decisiveness, framing him as a responsible, principled leader. Others emphasized Harry's perspective, portraying him as a brave, principled man standing up against family suppression. Even casual viewers were being drawn into a polarizing debate, forming opinions without ever knowing the intricate, unseen dynamics behind the headlines. Adding another layer of complexity, insiders revealed that several family allies were beginning to take sides openly. Some members of the extended royal family expressed support for William, reinforcing the importance of protocol, tradition, and hierarchy. Others quietly sympathized with Harry, praising his independence, empathy, and commitment to personal integrity. These subtle alignments were observed in private dinners, charitable events, and even ceremonial appearances, where gestures, seating arrangements, and glances conveyed more than words ever could. The tension reached another level when confidential messages, leaks from unnamed sources, started surfacing. Some revealed personal reflections from Harry. Others hinted at private frustrations about his role, responsibilities, and limitations within the royal framework. The palace responded with strategic silence, while Harry's team carefully monitored the leaks to ensure they didn't spiral out of control. Each revelation fueled public speculation, magnifying the perception of a feud and creating a narrative storm that threatened to eclipse the royal family's other activities entirely. Meanwhile, social media influencers, commentators, and celebrity journalists quickly jumped into the fray. Videos analyzing Harry and William's body language, memes depicting exaggerated confrontations, and op-eds dissecting past disputes all contributed to a sense that the royal family was unraveling in real time. This wasn't just a media cycle. It was a viral phenomenon, with public engagement skyrocketing as curiosity, fascination, and schadenfreude mixed in equal measure. Inside the palace, advisors were acutely aware that this storm could have tangible consequences. Public perception shapes authority, legitimacy, and influence. If Harry was seen as sympathetic and William as rigid, it could shift loyalties among the public and political stakeholders. If the opposite happened, William would solidify his authority, while Harry's independence might be framed as recklessness. Every tweet, every headline, every subtle social cue mattered. And then came the first tangible consequence, an internal reshuffling of royal engagements. Sources revealed that William took immediate action to subtly limit Harry's access to certain high-profile events. Invitations were either rescinded or subtly reworded, signaling that inclusion was conditional on adherence to family expectations and protocol. Harry, aware of these moves, had to make decisions, whether to accept them quietly, push back, or escalate the conflict through controlled public statements. The palace also began to prepare contingency plans for potential public confrontations. Advisors mapped out what could happen if Harry appeared at major events, how body language might be interpreted, and what preventive steps could be taken to avoid another public humiliation. Security arrangements were reviewed not only for safety but for strategic positioning, ensuring that any interaction between the brothers could be monitored, controlled, and, if necessary, contained. At the same time, private communications suggested that both brothers were reflecting deeply on their positions. Harry was reportedly writing personal letters and notes, considering both his family obligations and his desire for personal freedom. William, meanwhile, focused on long-term strategy, reinforcing boundaries and consolidating authority while carefully observing his brother's reactions. Both were maneuvering cautiously, aware that one misstep could change the narrative irreversibly. Publicly, the impact was immediate. Analysts noted a sharp increase in interest surrounding royal appearances, with cameras now following both brothers more closely than ever. Every movement, smile, and interaction, or lack thereof, was scrutinized for hints about the feud. News cycles expanded, not just in the UK, but internationally. Television networks, streaming platforms, and digital publications raced to cover the story, amplifying public fascination and reinforcing the perception that the royal family was embroiled in unprecedented turmoil. And then, as if the universe wanted to intensify the drama, a subtle leak occurred that shocked everyone. Confidential details of the private meeting from Chapter 4, words, gestures, even snippets of conversation, appeared in an exclusive report in a major publication. The palace scrambled, but the damage was done. Public interest exploded further, social media went into a frenzy, and pundits began speculating about whether reconciliation was even possible. Friends of Harry reported that he was deeply affected by the leak. While it validated some of his frustrations, it also exposed him to intense public scrutiny. The delicate balance between defending personal agency and maintaining dignity had shifted, publicly, privately, and emotionally. Every conversation, every interview, every appearance now carried amplified stakes. For William, the leak was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it reinforced his position as the enforcer of boundaries, validating his actions in the eyes of some observers. On the other hand, it highlighted the volatility of family dynamics and the potential for future breaches. He had to navigate not only the emotional fallout but also the strategic implications, ensuring that the monarchy remained credible and authoritative amidst escalating speculation. Meanwhile, Anne remained a stabilizing force, advising on measured responses while reinforcing the need to manage both narrative and perception. Her presence, whether physical or advisory, reminded the family and the public that authority, discipline, and responsibility were central to the monarchy's function. Her interventions, while subtle, were pivotal in preventing the conflict from spiraling beyond control. But even with Anne's influence and careful management, the situation continued to escalate. Royal insiders began reporting tension among staff, whispered debates about loyalty, and growing anxiety about how to handle public appearances. The media storm, already intense, was intensifying daily, and each new development fed the cycle. Every subtle gesture, every facial expression, and every statement was scrutinized for meaning. The global audience, meanwhile, remained captivated. Royal watchers, fans, critics, and casual observers were glued to their screens. The feud was no longer confined to palace walls. It had become a cultural moment, a narrative of family, power, and betrayal that played out in real time for millions. And then came the tipping point. A scheduled joint appearance at a major charity event loomed on the horizon, a gathering where both William and Harry were expected to attend. Everyone inside the palace knew that this event would either mark a tentative step toward reconciliation or escalate the feud into a very public confrontation. Security protocols were heightened, media management intensified, and advisors meticulously choreographed every aspect of the event. Because in the world of royalty, appearances are everything. One misstep, one awkward glance, one poorly timed interaction, and the world would witness a spectacle that could redefine history, loyalty, and family dynamics. But what happened at that charity event would shock everyone, even those closest to the family, and set the stage for a confrontation that no one, not even the palace staff, could have anticipated. Have you ever been in a room where every glance, every smile, every step carries weight? Imagine that room filled with royalty, celebrities, philanthropists, and global media. Tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. This was the setting for the charity gala that had been scheduled weeks before, now transformed into the most anticipated and most feared event in royal history. William arrived first, composed, deliberate, and commanding. Every detail of his appearance, from the placement of his cufflinks to the angle of his tie, had been meticulously planned. He knew the world was watching. He knew that every move he made would be interpreted, dissected, and shared across the globe within minutes. But most importantly, he knew that Harry would be there, and that this encounter would define the next chapter of their relationship. Harry arrived shortly after, dressed with a careful balance of elegance and personal style, projecting confidence, but with an underlying tension. Sources indicate he spent hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing interactions, and strategizing subtle ways to assert dignity while navigating the potential minefield of public perception. Every step into the ballroom was a calculated decision. Every nod, every handshake, every measured smile was part of a larger narrative he intended to project. The room was electric. Cameras flashed, whispers swept through the crowd, and staff members moved quietly, anticipating potential moments of tension. Observers described the atmosphere as almost surreal, a mix of ceremony, anticipation, and barely contained drama. And then it happened. Harry and William came face to face in the reception line. The first interaction was subtle, a brief handshake, polite smiles, but insiders report that beneath the surface, emotions were raw, unfiltered, and palpable. Guests could sense the friction, the years of unresolved conflict manifesting in a single, loaded encounter. As the event progressed, the tension escalated. Harry was seen engaging with attendees, making carefully measured remarks, and maintaining a poised demeanor. William, equally strategic, navigated conversations with the same calm authority, his gaze occasionally flicking toward Harry, assessing, calculating, and maintaining control. Every public observer could sense the underlying drama, even if they didn't yet understand its full scope. It wasn't long before the media noticed. Reporters captured fleeting glances, subtle shifts in posture, and the faintest of hesitations in conversations. Social media erupted almost instantaneously as analysts dissected body language, speculated about unspoken messages, and debated the future of the royal relationship. Videos of the encounter were shared millions of times within hours. Headlines ranged from tense royal reunion to brothers at odds, public show of discord, each amplifying the narrative of conflict and intrigue. Meanwhile, private sources revealed that the conversation between the brothers, though polite, was tense. In brief, whispered exchanges, William reportedly emphasized boundaries and expectations, reminding Harry of the importance of protocol, public perception, and family legacy. Harry, balancing emotion and strategy, responded with subtle hints of personal grievance, reinforcing his desire for autonomy while signaling willingness to comply with certain expectations. The situation escalated further during a key moment, a toast in the center of the ballroom. Cameras captured Harry raising his glass, offering words of unity and philanthropy, while William's expression remained poised but controlled. Insiders suggest that beneath the surface, both men were calculating the next move, aware that even a misinterpreted glance could trigger a media firestorm or signal weakness. And then came the pivotal moment, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in Harry's positioning. A step closer, a glance that lingered just a second too long. Observers reported a collective intake of breath. William, recognizing the challenge, responded immediately by adjusting his own stance, subtly reinforcing boundaries while maintaining composure. The tension in the room became palpable, electric, and almost unbearable. The media reacted instantly. Live broadcasts highlighted the moment, commentators speculated endlessly, and social media exploded with analysis, memes, and heated debate. Fans and critics were divided. Some praising Harry's confidence and subtle defiance, others lauding William's composure and authority. Every gesture, every glance, every interaction became fodder for public consumption, intensifying the drama. Backstage, advisors and staff were in overdrive. Security reviewed positioning, communications specialists monitored live coverage, and senior aides calculated potential scenarios for every possible outcome. The palace had never seen an event where emotional stakes, public scrutiny, and family dynamics intersected with such intensity. Meanwhile, whispers began to circulate about the reactions of other family members. Some expressed admiration for William's decisiveness, reinforcing protocol and boundaries. Others sympathized with Harry, noting the courage required to maintain dignity and independence under such scrutiny. The subtle alignments within the extended family added another layer of intrigue, as observers tried to anticipate who would influence the next move or leak information to the press. As the evening progressed, the clash between public appearance and private tension became increasingly visible. Observers noted subtle micro-expressions, fleeting moments of eye contact, and carefully controlled gestures. Guests described an almost theatrical quality to the interactions. Polished, poised, yet charged with emotion. Even those accustomed to royal protocol remarked on the unprecedented tension, the sense that history was unfolding in real time. And then, the unthinkable happened. During a brief private conversation captured by a discreet media photographer, Harry reportedly made a comment that insiders interpreted as a challenge to William's authority. William, sensing the implication, responded with a measured but firm reply, emphasizing family expectations and public duty. The exchange, brief as it was, ignited speculation across news outlets and social media platforms worldwide. The aftermath was immediate. Analysts dissected every angle. Was this the first step toward reconciliation, or a prelude to further conflict? How would the public interpret Harry's challenge? Would William respond further, reinforcing boundaries, or maintain composure to project authority? Every possibility was debated, analyzed, and scrutinized within hours of the event. In private, the impact was profound. Harry reportedly reflected on the encounter, weighing his next steps carefully. Advisors cautioned restraint, emphasizing the importance of timing, perception, and message control. William, too, reviewed the interaction with senior staff, considering how future engagements could be structured to maintain authority while avoiding public escalation. And, as always, provided guidance behind the scenes, balancing firmness with diplomacy and ensuring the family's cohesion remained intact, or at least as intact as possible. And yet, despite careful planning, strategic thinking, and decades of experience in public image management, the charity event confrontation had revealed something critical. The rift between the brothers was no longer just a private issue. It had become a global spectacle, a story consumed, debated, and analyzed by millions. The boundaries of family, loyalty, authority, and public perception had been tested, and the world was watching closely. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Sources hint that a video clip from the event, capturing the tense exchange between Harry and William, would soon surface online. The clip, brief but explosive, was poised to reignite global speculation, challenge narratives, and force both brothers, and the palace itself, into a rapid, high-stakes response. Because in the world of royalty, one private moment captured in public can shift the course of history, loyalty, and legacy in an instant. And what happened once that clip went viral would shock the world and change the trajectory of the royal feud in ways no one could have anticipated. Have you ever seen a single moment spiral into a global spectacle in minutes? That's exactly what happened when a discreet video clip of Harry and William's tense exchange at the charity gala surfaced online. Within moments, it was everywhere, on social media, news websites, and even in text chains between world leaders and journalists. The clip was short, barely 15